Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold, and this week I'm joined by special guest Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for the full show for the second week in a row. We had a lot of positive reviews about Chris on our last episode, so we're running it back. Chris Brown, thank you for joining me once again this week.
Thanks for having me again. I had to spend a lot of money to pay people to give you those reviews to keep me back. But no, it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, the reviews were all for free. For the Tigers, it was a 5-1 record this week in their 6-game homestand at Comerica Park. 3-0 versus the Houston Astros, 2-1 versus the Kansas City Royals. 3-game sweep with the Astros. The Tigers won 10-0 on Monday, 1-0 on Tuesday, and 7-2 on Wednesday. And I think that was a statement series by the Tigers. Coming in, the Tigers had started to turn it around against the Los Angeles Angels, the Chicago White Sox, the Minnesota Twins. And then it felt like that real test occurred against the Astros, the third best team in the American League, the leaders of the AL West. And the Tigers reminded everyone why they're one of the best teams in baseball. You saw that in Monday's 10-0 win. The Tigers scored all of their runs in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th innings. But let's not forget what Jack Flaherty did. 7 scoreless innings, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. It was the first time he completed 7 innings in his 2-year career with the Tigers. On a personal level, happy for Jack because he's been working his ass off all year trying to find it. And more often than not, he hasn't been able to find it. That's why he has a 4.87 ERA in 26 starts. It's been a mess, but for that game, to see him find it again, what a treat. And also a good reminder of what he can do, what he can be in the postseason. Like if he can repeat his delivery, his mechanics, his movement down the mound, it's all about the way his body's moving and then repeating it. If he can do that, Jack Flaherty can be really good. And then Tuesday's 1-0 win. The intensity could not have been higher. It's Tarek Skubal versus Hunter Brown, 2 aces, 2 Cy Young candidates. Skubal goes 7 scoreless innings with 10 strikeouts. Brown goes 6 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts. And then the game remains scoreless into the bottom of the 9th inning when Gleyber Torres draws a bases loaded walk to win the game. And it was the 500th RBI of his MLB career. So a milestone there, just 1 game after he celebrated his 1000th game. And then you have Wednesday's 7-2 win, and the Tigers just attack Framber Valdez, one of the better left-handed starters in baseball, for 6 runs in the first inning and all 7 runs within the first 3 innings. Tigers had a 5-0 lead before Framber Valdez could record his first out in the first inning. So that was just a really fun series for the Tigers. And again, a statement series. I think the Tigers reminded everyone that they're the top dogs in the American League by the way that they went about their business in sweeping the Astros.
Yeah. And you know, you're down there all the time and talking to AJ Hinch and seeing him. And I think he would never put more emphasis on any one team over another one. But I think there's always a little bit extra, I don't know, a little sparkle in his voice, if you will, when they take down the Astros.
100%.
Yeah. So, that was, I think I said last week, you know, I was hoping it would be kind of like the Cubs series from earlier in the year where the fans were really into it. And they came out and it was an early week series and they really showed up, and all 3 of those games were really exciting in different ways. You know, so fans love a tight, close game like that game 2, but they also love it when you blow people out in the first inning and just kind of coast to victory. So that was one of the better series for the Tigers all year. And it kind of, to me, I think cemented them as being back. You know, this is the team we saw for most of the first half of the season, and they were putting good bats together and pitching well and playing the right way. And so they deserve that 3-game sweep.
The Tigers are back. Riley Greene is back. Riley Greene has reached 30 home runs. And oh, by the way, he's walking again. Really, for the first time all year, Riley Greene is drawing walks. He did that a lot last season, and it's what made him good last year. This year, not so much, but he is finally getting around to the walks. Before we get to that, though, I want to make sure we highlight he hit his 30th home run in Friday's 7-5 win over the Royals, and it was a clutch home run, too. The Tigers had a runner on first and 2 outs in the 6th inning. They were trailing 3-1. The Royals called left-handed reliever Angel Zerpa out of the bullpen, and for those keeping track at home, Riley Greene, he is not very good against lefties. Entering Friday's game, he was hitting .207 with a .594 OPS against lefties. So the Royals bring a lefty reliever out of the bullpen to face Riley Greene in that situation. Tigers down by 2 runs, runner on first, 2 outs. Riley Greene hits a 2-run home run, tying the game 3-3. The Tigers then score 4 runs in the 7th inning, making it a 7-3 lead. And really it was that game-tying home run from Riley that was the big swing that opened the floodgates for the Tigers in that win against the Royals. And it was his 30th home run, the first time he has done that in his 4-year MLB career, and the first Tigers left-handed hitter to collect 30 home runs since Prince Fielder in 2012. That's a really good accomplishment for Riley Greene. But more importantly than the 30 home runs, he's doing something right now that he hasn't done all season, and it's drawing walks and limiting strikeouts. In his last 12 games, Riley Greene is hitting .211 with 4 home runs, 11 walks, and 7 strikeouts. That is a 21.6% walk rate and a 13.7% strikeout rate in his last 12 games, compared to a 5.8% walk rate and a 32.6% strikeout rate in his first 116 games. So Riley Greene absolutely flipping the script from what he did in his first 116 games to what he has done in his last 12 games. Is it sustainable? I'm not sure. But what I like is this. I like the fact that Riley Greene in the first 116 games, he hit .269, but he had a .313 on-base percentage and an .820 OPS. Riley Greene in his last 12 games, he's hitting just .211. So the batting average is down, but he has a .392 on-base percentage and a .971 OPS. So the batting average is down, but the on-base percentage is way up. The OPS is way up. And it's just a reminder that there are multiple ways to be a good baseball player. And I like the version that is walking once per game and isn't really striking out all the time. I think that version is better for the Tigers. And the data shows that that version is better for Riley Greene. So a lot to like this week, from the Astros to the Riley Greene walks and a whole lot in between. But Chris, with the walks and Riley Greene, do you think this is sustainable, or is it a flash in the pan?
I don't think it's sustainable what he's doing right now, whereas I think more walks and strikeouts really, but I do think it's in him to do this. We saw at the beginning of last year, you mentioned that he's a guy who can take walks. He just got, and he's always going to strike out a little bit because of the uphill swing, but he's a guy who's got incredible bat to ball skills. He always has. That's one of the, the main things about him that the Tigers like when they drafted him. And it's just finding that middle ground where he's not. You saw points there in like the worst stretch where I think he struck out 43 times to 1 walk.
It was anything up and anything down, and he was swinging at it and he was chasing onto the zone, and it was a strikeout. Yeah.
And even then, he's always has that wild uppercut swing, but he was even wilder. His helmet was popping off. He was spinning out of control. It was just, sometimes it's a long season and little changes over the course of time can build up. And by the end of that, you're way out of whack. So I think he has made some changes, and maybe it's just being a little bit more calm in the box and trusting your teammates and not thinking you have to be the guy who's going to drive, the 3-run homer over the wall. But yeah, I agree with you. This offense is so much better when he is contributing in more ways than just hitting for power, and getting on base is a huge thing because there are guys behind him who could drive him in.
So a good week for the Tigers, a good week for Riley Greene. When you look at the MLB standings, the Tigers, they had a 5-1 record this week. That puts them at 78-54 for the 2025 season, 10.5 games over the Kansas City Royals for first place in the American League Central, and 1.5 games over the Toronto Blue Jays for first place in the American League. Not only do the Tigers lead the Blue Jays by 1.5 games, but they also lead the Astros by 5.5 games, the Boston Red Sox by 6.5 games, the New York Yankees by 7 games, and the Seattle Mariners by 7.5 games. If the playoffs were to start right now, the Tigers would get a bye to the best of 5 ALDS, skipping the best of 3 wildcard series. With that bye, the Tigers would await the winner of the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees in the wildcard series. So it could be Alex Bregman and the Red Sox or Aaron Judge and the Yankees, but the Tigers still have 30 games remaining this season. A lot can still change. Right now, the AL playoff picture has the Tigers as the AL Central winners, the Blue Jays as the AL East winners, the Astros as the AL West winners, with the Red Sox, Yankees, and the Mariners as the wildcard teams. But again, we still have a month of baseball left, so you can't count out the Royals, the Rangers, the Guardians from making a late push. And I never like to rule out the Tampa Bay Rays, even though they're 6.5 games back in the wildcard race right now. The Rays can be a good team. They got a really good manager in Kevin Cash. I don't like to rule them out. And if for some reason, by the way, the Tigers and the Astros have the same record at the end of the season, the Tigers have the tiebreaker over the Astros for postseason seeding because they won the season series. 4 wins for the Tigers, 3 wins for the Astros. that's another reason why that 3-game sweep this past week was so important.
Yeah, and I believe that they actually don't have the tiebreaker against the Blue Jays. So should things get tied there. And, for somebody of my vintage who grew up watching baseball in the 80s, it feels right to have the Tigers and Blue Jays be at the top of the standings. Like that was a good rivalry when I was a young kid. So that's fun. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about the rest of the Central or the rest of the playoff seeding. I'm keeping an eye on what Toronto's doing, and because they're a good team and we've seen them. But yeah, now I'm just kind of coming up with ways for the Tigers. Like, what could they do over the final 30 games to have some fun? And this was, I was looking at it, and they've got a .591 winning percentage right now, which if they have that for the entire season, that gives them 96 wins, which is actually would be the most since 1987 when they took the final 3 games against Toronto. So it's just kind of fun. We'd look back at these seasons from the early teens and think about how great they were, but they never won more than 95 games. They won 95 in 2006. They won 95 in 2011. They won, I think, 93 in 2013 and then 90 and 88 in 2012 when they made the World Series. So it's kind of fun for me to think like, hey, can they get to 96 wins? Can they be better than those teams from 10, 15, 20 years ago? And so, you have to go 18 and 12, which sounds tougher than I think it is. Just they've gone 18 and 12 a bunch of different times this year over a 30-game span, but they do have these last 30 games. It is 18 on the road and 12 at home, which I think makes it a little tougher. And I could get into the whole schedule or whatever, but I just think it's kind of fun. Do we think that they can get to 96 wins?
No, I think it's okay to walk through the schedule. And again, an old friend always told me it doesn't matter who you play, it matters how you play. Now, you remember when the Tigers had their 1-12 stretch in July? Well, they were swept by the Pirates in a 3-game series. And then you remember when the Twins took 2 of 3 from them after the trade deadline. And then you remember when even as recently as mid-August, the Tigers won 2 of 3 against the White Sox, but both of their wins were 1-run wins that easily could have gone the other way. So I'll say it again. It doesn't matter who you play. It matters how you play. The good news is the Tigers are playing their good brand of baseball again. And if you care about who they play, it's the Athletics, Royals, Mets, White Sox, Yankees, Marlins, Guardians, Braves, Guardians again, and Red Sox to finish the season. Can they go 18 and 12 in those games? I think it's possible, but would I be shocked if the Yankees sweep them in New York, in the Bronx? Or if the much improved Marlins take 2 of 3 in Miami? Or if the Red Sox steal 2 of 3 at Fenway Park in the final series of the season? Like, if those 3 things happen, Yankees sweep in 3, Marlins take 2 of 3, Red Sox take 2 of 3. That would be 2-7 for their record in those 9 games. And then we're talking about the Tigers needing to go 16-3 in their other 19 games to get to 96 wins. For me, that would not happen. So it really just depends on how the schedule shakes out. But I certainly think if the cards fall the right way, and if they don't, get swept by the Yankees or go through a rough stretch of games where they're only winning like 2 of 9, for example, if they're able to play solid baseball, I do think that they can finish 18 and 12 to get to 96 wins.
What's fun about it is it's not hard to picture it happening, right? Like it's, I think just my sort of logical brain center says, yeah, it's probably going to go 15 or 15 down the stretch, whatever, it's baseball. But, and who knows? They've not been to Sacramento. Who knows how they'll react to playing at a minor league stadium? And the A's have some interesting talent. So, but yeah, all it takes is another one of these 5-game winning streaks and suddenly like, oh, they only have to go 13 and 12. So it works either way. And they seem to be good at these 5-game winning streaks, not so much the 6-game winning streaks, which they have a bit of a pull off. But yeah, I think, and again, winning 96 games, winning 95, 94 doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. It's just something to kind of look back on in the future, right? Like the season is told, or the story of the season is told after the season. We have these fun anecdotes and things that happen during the season that kind of you think back and go, oh yeah, I remember 2006 when Zamaya gave up a grand slam to Ken Griffey Jr. on a 103-mile-an-hour pitch, but the Tigers came back and won. Like, you just kind of remember these little things, but they don't tell the story of the season. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. But yeah, go for 96. All in for 96. Let's do it.
All right, let's get into the big 2. Question 1 of the big 2. From July 9th to 26th, the Tigers had a 1-12 record in 13 games. Since then, the Tigers have an 18-8 record in 26 games. How did they bounce back from the bad stretch? And for me, it always goes back to pitching. President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris likes to talk about the strength of the Tigers being pitching and defense. And what we've seen is that when the Tigers are pitching well, the Tigers are winning games. That's been the case for more than 365 days now, more than a calendar year. Since July 27th, the Tigers pitching staff ranks 5th in MLB with a 3.46 ERA. The rotation ranks 8th with a 3.76 ERA, and the bullpen ranks 3rd with a 2.96 ERA. To me, that is how the Tigers have bounced back. They started pitching better across the board. Is that sustainable? Probably in the rotation. I think it can be a top 10 rotation in baseball because you've got the best starter in the world in Tarek Skubal. But do I think the Tigers will continue to be the 3rd best bullpen in baseball as they have been since July 27th? That's probably not happening. But for how they've gotten back on track, it's the pitching. And then I also think we need to tip our cap to the offense, especially early in games. I love seeing them jump on Framber Valdez for 6 runs in the first inning in Wednesday's 7-2 win against the Astros. It was just quality at bat after quality at bat. I felt like we started seeing more of that in the series against the Twins in Minneapolis when the Tigers took 3 of 4 games. In that series, the Tigers were just beating up on bad pitching. And that's something that they did such a good job of before their 1-12 stretch. They would always beat up on bad pitching. Not so much until they pulled into Minneapolis and jumped all over the Twins pitchers. And then it continued into the Astros series, even against an above average pitcher like Framber Valdez. So the quality of the at-bats are better. And it's not just happening against bad pitchers anymore. It's happening against all pitchers. I think that's a really good sign for the Tigers moving forward. And shout out to Tigers hitting coaches, Michael Berdar, Keith Beauregard, Lance Zawadski, for all of their game planning, both pregame and in-game, as well as the work in the batting cage with the hitters. The offense looks a lot better, especially over the last 2 weeks, and the hitting coaches are a part of that. The data backs it up too. Since July 27th, the Tigers offense ranks 4th in MLB with a 119 WRC plus, trailing only the Milwaukee Brewers, Toronto Blue Jays, and New York Mets. They're also not striking out as much. Only a 23.1% strikeout rate since July 27th. That ranks 20th among the 30 teams. Not great, but it's in line with their season-long strikeout rate. But in that 1-12 stretch from July 9th to 26th, the Tigers had an MLB worst 26.9% strikeout rate. So they've gone from striking out 27% of the time to now only striking out 23% of the time. So when you go from 30th in strikeout rate to 20th in strikeout rate, that certainly helps. So the approaches are better. Every hitter seems to be sticking to his plan and executing. So it's offense, it's pitching, and then the defense has been good too. It's just been a clean brand of baseball. Whereas in that 1-12 stretch, there was some sloppy play. It's gotten a lot better. And I think it does start with pitching, but let's not forget about the offense and the defense. It's really just been a improved all-around product for the Tigers getting back to their winning ways.
Yeah, baseball is kind of a game that's played in multiple phases, right? You got the offense on its own, and within that you got hitting and base running and things like that, and then it's run prevention, right? Which encompasses starting pitching, relief pitching, defense, and for whatever reason, and it's just one of those phenomena that I don't think we'll ever quite understand, that all stopped working in that 13-game stretch. It all did. They had the worst offense in baseball. They had the worst pitching in baseball out of nowhere. It was a 60 WRC plus in that stretch. 40% below league average. They just, their batting average was 200. I think their isolated power, which is slugging percentage minus batting average, was at 100, which is no good. They weren't hitting for power. They weren't walking. I'm with you that it feels like this offense is at its best. And I go back to the very first series of the season when they were playing the Dodgers, and they got swept. But you're like, boy, I really like the way that offense looked. They were taking pitches, they were working walks, they were getting the pitch counts up high. It just didn't work out. But that's when they're at their best. When you see these long at bats, or they get ahead and they force the pitcher to give them a pitch that they can drive. And we've seen that a lot more lately. But as for why they went down so hard across the board and how they came back, I don't really know. To me, it's just kind of one of those, it's like the sports is a metaphor for life, right? Like the only way out is through. They just kept playing and they got through it. And then sometimes it just takes one or two things. Team sports are funny that way, right? Where everybody's tight. The tightness is contagious, but then everybody gets loose again and the looseness is contagious. And you see it, they got down on Sunday. They got down 6-1, and they could have easily phoned that one in, but they fought all the way back and took a 7-6 lead. It was like, this feels like last year's Tigers. Now things got a little swirly from then and they lost again, but it was like, that's the team that we were used to seeing, that they didn't think that they were out of games. They would work at bats. They would scratch back. And no, sometimes it just goes away, I guess. It's a weird thing. You got to be there in the locker room to figure it out. And even they don't know. So like I said, you got to get through it.
Yeah. If you ask enough guys, whether it's players or whether it's AJ Hinch, they'll tell you it's just baseball. And I think Part of that is true. It's just baseball. It's a really long season. Teams are going to go through ups and downs, but the gritty Tigers are back just in time. 2 weeks ago, we did the panic meter. I was at a medium. 1 week ago, I was between low and medium. And now I'm at low. My panic level is low because the Tigers have proven to me that they can bounce back from a bad stretch. To this point, we hadn't seen that. Like, they've just been that good since August of 2024. So it was really encouraging to see them go through a rough stretch and then bounce back with a lot of wins. I think that's an encouraging sign for them moving forward. And now I'm not worried at all anymore. Even if they hit another rough patch in early September, now let's not slump our way into October. But at the same time, they've proven that they can go through a bad stretch and they can climb their way back out of it. And this was really the first taste that we actually got of that in this new Tigers era, going back to last August and the magical run that they went on. So I think it was good, especially now that they've come out of it, to reflect back and say, okay, yep, this team, they can take their lumps and they can come out of it on the other side. I think that's a really encouraging thing for this group moving forward.
Yeah, I think it goes to the general mantra of, we talked to Scott Harris a year ago and he talked about players in the player development process needing to face some adversity and learn how to deal with it. And a team is nothing but just a bunch of players together. It's a Voltron. It's one big player. And when they learn to deal with the adversity, then yeah, that's a one more step in their development as a team and as a potential championship team. So I agree with you. I think that was good for them ultimately. And also I agree with you that don't ever do it again.
Yeah. Let's not stumble our way into October. Okay. Let's go into October red hot and try to go all the way now. All right. Question 2 of the big 2. The Tigers have given new roles to rehabbing pitchers Alex Cobb and Jose Urquidy. How could the Tigers bullpen look on September 1st? What's going to happen with Alex Cobb? What's going to happen with Jose Urquidy? There's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, Alex Cobb, he is rehabbing for injuries to both hips, his right hip and his left hip. Jose Urquidy is rehabbing from his second Tommy John surgery. From everything I'm hearing, the Tigers are definitely looking forward to Urquidy more than Cobb, but both players are nearing the end of their rehab assignments. Pitchers get 30 days on rehab assignment. Cobb started his rehab assignment July 29th, which means he needs to be activated by August 28th. That's in 3 days. Jose Urquidy, he started his rehab assignment August 3rd, which means he needs to be activated by September 2nd. So it's August 28th for Cobb and September 2nd for Urquidy. One note on this, the Tigers could get an extension, definitely for Urquidy, and I believe maybe for Cobb as well, if they get consent from the player and permission from the commissioner's office. So maybe we could see the Tigers extending those rehab assignments beyond the allotted 30 days. But I'm not sure if those players would agree to that. I mean, Alex Cobb has talked about being loyal to the Tigers, and now he is on the doorstep of pitching in the big leagues for what will be the last time of his career. And the Tigers might keep him on rehab assignment for who knows how long. Like, this guy wants to pitch one last time before he retires. I don't see how he consents to an extended rehab assignment, if that's even possible, because he wants to pitch one more time before his career is over. Even if it's just one game, he wants to go out there, take the ball, and pitch in the big leagues one last time. That's what he's been fighting for this whole season. As for Urquidy, I could see the extension happening just because he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, so it's 100% allowed. That is the one thing, that the extension is allowed for players coming back from Tommy John surgery. And then there's a little bit of gray area with other injuries, but maybe if the player consents and the commissioner's office signs off on it, it's possible, but certainly possible if the player consents coming back from Tommy John surgery. So the extension 100% allowed in Jose Urquidy's situation, as long as the commissioner's office follows through and grants permission. But additionally, Jose Urquidy has a team option for the 2026 season, so he could be around into the future. I fully expect Jose Urquidy to pitch for the Tigers in 2025, but if he didn't, I don't think he would feel devastated. Whereas Alex Cobb, if he doesn't pitch for the Tigers in 2025, he will feel devastated because he has pitched through immense pain in his hips to the point where it's hard for him to walk. He's taken too many injections to count to alleviate the pain, and he's grinded through so many rehab outings, and his career is done after this. There is no 2026 for Alex Cobb, but there is for Jose Urquidy. So that's why if there were extensions thrown out for rehab assignments and the players had to consent, I could see Jose Urquidy consenting to it, but I'm not so sure that Alex Cobb would say, yeah, keep me on rehab assignment, as long as you want. I think Alex Cobb wants to pitch for the Detroit Tigers now before it's too late, because there is no 2026 for Alex Cobb. As for the roles, the Tigers have recently changed the roles for both of those guys. Alex Cobb coming out of the bullpen and hovering around the 30 to 45 pitch range, where Urquidy, he's still building up his pitch count and innings. He hasn't thrown more than 2 innings and 33 pitches, which is why I think a rehab assignment extension could be coming. but he's going to end up pitching anywhere between 2 and 4 innings, probably nothing more than that. So both of these guys are pitching shorter outings more often, emulating that bullpen role with Alex Cobb actually coming out of the bullpen. As for what happens here, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Cobb joins the Tigers on August 28th when he needs to be activated from his rehab assignment, pitches in 1 or 2 games for the Tigers, and then never pitches again. I could see the Tigers replacing Cobb with Jose Urquidy on September 2nd. And then I could see the Tigers using Urquidy in a 3 or 4 inning stint type of a role, either out of the bullpen or as a starter in a piggyback situation with someone like a Troy Melton. But if we do see Alex Cobb, I just don't think he's going to be around for very long. The sinker is averaging 91 miles an hour. The splitter isn't missing bats. I've got a ton of respect for Alex Cobb and everything that he's done to try to pitch for the Tigers, but it's not good and it's not getting any better.
It's tough because when you watch him, and I've watched a few of his outings down there in both West Michigan and Toledo on TV. I haven't seen him in person. This stuff looks okay. Like the results are solid. He's getting strikeouts. He's not giving up a ton of runs. The walks are higher, I think, than you would expect. But he doesn't look comfortable. It looks really painful. It's almost like, it reminds me of my dad used to walk around and hike, and then he had to get double hip replacement surgery. And, he just kind of hobbling around. He looks, I don't know if you've ever had a pet dog that got kind of old and the hips went out. It kind of looks like that. It feels bad. But I think they are going to give him a shot. I think your scenario that you put out there is probably close to what's going to happen. You hope for the best. He can come up and provide a role, but I didn't even know what the role would be really at this point. I mean, you're talking, they're going to have to make a roster move, 2 if you count, because he's going to have to come off the 60-day IL. So they have to add him to the 40-man, and then they have to add him to the 26-man roster. So that's going to require some movement there.
And then you got Urquidy coming right after that as well. So that's 2 roster moves from the 26-man. Who are you pulling out of the bullpen at this point, right? Like, I think that's the way that you have to look at it. When you take a peek at where this bullpen is at, who are you cutting?
Yeah. And when both guys, and I tend to agree with you that I think Urquidy has more of a potential role, but both guys they're starters, but they're not, these aren't like the, converted starter to bullpen arms that are coming out throwing flames by guys like a Jackson Jobe or Troy Melton, where they're just putting them there because the stuff is so pure. These are guys who get by with spin and deception and location. And so, I mean, there might be a better role for that in the playoffs, honestly, where everything gets magnified and you're not going to sit around and watch Jack Flaherty give up 7 straight hits. He gives up 3 hits, he's gone, like something like that. And you need somebody to eat some innings. They could fill a role there, but down the stretch here, I mean, I do kind of like your idea of maybe doing some piggyback starts down the stretch. But I think these are the guys who get you from, if your starter goes 4 innings or 5 innings, they get you through the 6th and 7th possibly. And that's what their role will be. But again, who are you kicking out of the bullpen for that?
Right.
They've got some guys that they can move back down, but they're going to need to make some actual roster moves.
Yeah, I mean, you look at even September 1st, rosters expand and they can add somebody to that bullpen, fine, but you still need a spot for Alex Cobb if he's coming back here at the end of August. And Kyle Finnegan's not going anywhere. Will Vest is not going anywhere. Tyler Holton is not going anywhere. And if the Tigers are committed to Rafael Montero and Tommy Kahnle and trying to get those guys right by the time we get to the playoffs, you're looking at Brennan Hanafy, Drew Summers, Troy Melton. Who are you booting out of the bullpen for Alex Cobb? And if you want Drew Summers to pitch against the Royals in the upcoming series on the road, because the Royals have a bunch of left-handed hitters, that's why they summoned Drew Summers now. You're not going to get rid of Drew Summers. So are you getting rid of Brennan Hanafy? Are you getting rid of Troy Melton? I can't imagine you're getting rid of Troy Melton. So are you going to boot Brennan Hanafy for Alex Cobb? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That just doesn't make sense to me. So again, we'll see how it all shakes out. Only time will tell. But Alex Cobb, Jose Urquidy, they're coming. How are the Tigers going to make room for them? Not so sure about that right now. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're joined by Geoff Pontes of Baseball America, talking a whole lot about Kevin McGonigle. Everyone, I'd like to welcome Geoff Pontes, a prospect writer for Baseball America, to the Days of Roar podcast. We've had him on the show before, and we're lucky to have him back to discuss Kevin McGonigle and some other Tigers prospects. Geoff, thank you for joining me.
Hey, man. Happy to be on.
All right, so let's start with the big news on Kevin McGonigle. Tigers general manager Jeff Greenberg recently appeared on MLB Network, and he ruled out McGonigle making his MLB debut in 2025. Here's what Jeff Greenberg said, quote, "No, I don't think that's on the radar right now. Again, they've only been in Double-A for a month. It's been fewer than 30 games. Really excited with what Kevin has done. Really excited with what Max has done and some of the other guys in our system. But right now, the focus is on their development and getting the reps to continue to take those steps forward, end quote. So Kevin McGonigle will not make his MLB debut in 2025, but Geoff Pontes, do you think he's ready?
I do. I think he's one of these guys where, granted, you're not going to have peak seasons right off the bat, but if you're asking me if he could produce a league average or better stat line, probably isn't going to be your starting shortstop, probably more of a second baseman at this point, but you could start him there. You could start him at third base as well. Absolutely. He's better than guys that are in the major leagues right now. Like, in terms of looking at the whole numbers and, would he be an everyday guy for the Tigers? I think so. Would he improve that lineup and, potentially make them a better team down the stretch? I think so. Obviously these things aren't guaranteed, but I think if you look at the history of players who produce in this manner, and that's not just the slash line. It's more than just the baseball card stats. You start to look at the underlying data and all the traits that he has as a hitter, and even beyond all the analytical stuff. We can go old school on it, just the eyeball test. Watch 4 games of Kevin McGonigle consecutively, and you just see baseball IQ and acumen that you don't see even with all the guys in the big leagues and a lot of guys in the big leagues that are very good players. He just plays the game at a different level beyond all the skills and everything else. It's like, 80 grade baseball IQ. And, you see it in his BPs, just even how he takes batting practice, a real professional round early. And then like at the Futures game, when he wanted to start to drive the ball to his pull side, he was launching balls up to the chop house with the best of them. And I mean, these are some of the bigger prospects, power prospects in the game. He was slugging balls right beside Lazaro Montes in terms of where it was going over in the chop house. Carter Jensen, guys with bigger raw power, much bigger physical frames. And I think that's what it is he just does so many things well. And, it's a good arm. It's a good release. His footwork is good at shortstop. He's the kind of guy that's not going to take it or loaf down the line when he hits a ground ball to the shortstop. That's probably an easy 6-3 out. He's going to leg that out. I think in a lot of ways, he's very comparable, and we've made this comp internally, and it's kind of the small body comp, and one guy's a lefty, one guy's a righty, but it's like Dustin Pedroia type of traits and attributes. And I don't mean that. I think he's honestly a more talented hitter than Pedroia was. I mean, it's one of the reasons he got drafted out of high school and has had this production that he has at this early. He's going to debut a lot earlier than Pedroia does, but he has those traits as someone who grew up here in Boston, watching the Red Sox at that point in time every day. You saw those sort of little things that he did during the game that just made him different and honestly better than what his physical attributes are. He plays above his physical attributes, but all that stuff is still really, really good at him.
So for prospects, Kevin McGonigle, the best hitter you evaluated since who and when?
Yeah, I think purely from a hit tool standpoint, probably Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I saw a lot of Vlad in New Hampshire. At the time, it was me and Lance Brozdowski, who's on the Marquee, network doing his thing. And, one of the best analytical minds in baseball. He and I were kind of coming up doing this part-time while we had jobs in Massachusetts. And we would drive up to New Hampshire to go see Vlad Guerrero Jr. And we hosted a podcast together where we talked about prospects. And I mean, the things that he did, Vlad, I'm talking about, were pretty remarkable. He wasn't as twitchy, obviously, as McGonigle is. Different type of body type, a right-handed hitter versus a left-handed hitter again. But just in terms of his ability to hit any kind of pitch, any sort of pitch shape and location, and sort of do the exact thing that a hitting coach would want you to do in that situation. It's just sort of that textbook hitting, but also like the ability to identify and discern balls and strikes at a really, really high rate. Vlad had a lot more raw thump. Some of that is just the physicality of Vlad's a much bigger guy. At the same time, when we talk about elevating the ball and elevating the ball to your pull side, at this point in time in AA, both the Eastern League guys, similar age, similar pro experience, McGonigle lifts the ball a lot better, backspins it a lot cleaner, and he does it to his pull side, which for a guy like McGonigle is really, really important. And I'll talk about another smaller prospect here, but guy who's bigger than McGonigle. But Travis Bazzano last year I sat down with after the draft. I've known Travis since, his freshman year at Oregon State. And, he's a great guy to just talk hitting with because he really thinks about it at a high level. And one of the points that he made to me was, the numbers that I look at my air pull. I look at how consistently am I getting into my pull side power. And the reason that's really important to me as a hitter is I'm 5'11". I'm not Aaron Judge, right? I need to be able to optimize my power and my home run power by hitting the ball down the lines as consistently as I can. And that's something that McGonigle already does really, really well. When you sort of look at the profile from an analytical perspective, it's flawless. There really isn't an area where I can sort of pinpoint and, nitpick in any real fashion.
Going back to Kevin McGonigle, and is he ready or is he not? Obviously, the Tigers are not going to be calling him up in 2025. They come out and said that. But you mentioned maybe he could be ready. And then when I think about it, it's like Kevin McGonigle's 21 years old. He actually just turned 21 on August 18th. So happy birthday to Kevin. But going back to 2010, we've seen Mike Trout debut at 19, Bryce Harper at 19, Rafael Devers at 20, Juan Soto at 19, Wander Franco at 20, Francisco Alvarez at 20, Gunnar Henderson at 21, Jackson Chourio at 20, Sammy Basallo at 20. And again, Kevin McGonigle right now is 21. I know some of those guys, the Trouts, the Harpers, the Devers, those guys are generational talents. So is that the only thing really separating Kevin McGonigle from some of those names I just mentioned? Like, it just seems like he's ready to be here now, and he's not being challenged in Double-A. So why not get him up here when we've seen players that are younger than him come up and make a real impact immediately?
Yeah, and I think you sort of look at, and, he's had as good of a season as you could possibly hope for out of Zach McKinstry, and a really, valuable player but ideally, isn't he sort of best suited for a utility role where you can use him in a variety of spots? All throughout your lineup. The guy can pretty much play every position on the field, but like catcher and pitcher. And I guess if the score was right, he could probably come in and pitch. I'm not going to take that away from him. But like McGonigle, in my opinion, would really change this lineup and add a little bit more firepower at the top. Because I think he's your leadoff guy whenever he comes up, if he's up before Max Clark. If Max Clark is up, I'd probably have the two of those guys right at the top of your lineup and have, Carpenter and Greene and Torque and all those settle in behind him. But I really do think that it upgrades your lineup quite a bit. And honestly, defensively, he's probably going to give you a lot more than Colt Keith is at third base. So I think there's value, and just in terms of how the puzzle piece fits in, he helps you in a variety of areas. You're really not sort of jamming in a square peg into a round hole, which, I think we've seen with some prospects where Samuel Basallo's up with the Orioles now, just signed a big long-term extension. It took them maybe a little bit longer than they needed to call him up because they had first baseman, they had Adley Rutschman. It's like, where does this fit in? I think you can very easily look at this lineup and say, oh yeah, I can see exactly where McGonigle is going to be an upgrade. And it might be 3 or 4 different spots in that lineup, frankly.
Remember back, Colt Keith, before he made his MLB debut, he signed a 6-year, $28.6 million contract with the Tigers. That locked him up. Kevin McGonigle, is he going to be getting some offers coming his way from the Tigers? Do you think after we've seen teams do this over and over again, the Tigers have some precedent with Colt Keith? They want to lock their young players up. Obviously, sometimes it's easier said than done, but do you think Kevin McGonigle is a prime candidate to get paid? And what do you think that might look like?
Yeah. I think absolutely he is a prime candidate to get an offer for a contract extension. I wouldn't be shocked if they've already made some sort of approach on that. I don't know anything about this, but just knowing kind of the behind the scenes from Roman Anthony, that I know those discussions were going on starting in the fall of last season, at least from sort of what I've pieced together. And I think that's the case with Jackson Chourio and some of these other players that sign these extensions where, these conversations don't just come out of nowhere. And I don't think they start in June. I think they start before the season starts, especially if a player will agree to a deal like that. It sort of puts you in a position as a team to, if you think the guy is ready, break camp with him and then benefit again if that player he's up before the right date and qualifies for, the rookie of the year stuff and then, potentially a PPI pick down the road. I think when you're managing a guy like McGonigle, and I will say it's one thing I think was maybe mismanaged with the Red Sox a little bit with Roman Anthony, is you want to get that extra pick. That extra money in the draft is a difference maker. Getting a few $1 million extra onto your bonus pool in the draft really allows you to target a lot more players across the board in the way the MLB draft works, where you can kind of move that money with bonus money and pull guys down into later spots. There's a whole, sort of like ecosystem that revolves around, doing the right thing with a player like this and maybe getting a deal done. It would not shock me if he gets a contract offer that's north of $100 million, locking him down for some of those years on the back end, where he would hit free agency very early and very young. They're trying to buy guys out of those early free agency years. And I think for a lot of players, it makes sense. There's other guys that have turned down a lot of these offers because they do want to get to that early free agency and sort of bet on themselves. But there's some risk there, regardless of how talented a prospect you are. So yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if they don't try to make an offer like this, and especially when it's an organization that there is some precedent.
For Kevin McGonigle as the player, what are his best skills on offense? We all know he can hit, but when you look at the offensive body of work as a whole, what stands out to you? And then is there anything on offense that needs improvement that you could pinpoint and say, if he could get a little bit better in this area or that area, he could really elevate himself to that next level?
Yeah. And, I think the first thing is the easy answer is sort of the hit tool. But I think that there's other components outside of just putting the bat on the ball, right? It's the decisions that you make at the plate in terms of the pitches you swing at and don't swing at. There's a lot of guys that have existed in this game that had outlier contact, that could hit anything like McGonigle can, that swung themselves into bad contact, swung themselves into outs because they didn't, sort of keep a tidy zone. His overall hit tool, that when we sort of put it into the perspective of plate skills, and I think that kind of falls into three different categories, which is that contact, that bat to ball ability we're talking about. It's also swing decisions. And what I mean by swing decisions, how often do you chase outside of the zone and expand that zone, make it most of the time you're making it easy for the pitcher, especially if you do it at a high rate. There's always some stuff that, some chase pitches above, below, outside, inside, that are probably good pitches to swing at. McGonigle will probably hit a lot of those. But also it's not being passive, because I think there's a lot of guys, particularly in the minors, that can juice their walk rates by not swinging. He swings a fair amount of the time for how much he chases and how aggressive he is within the strike zone. And I think that's probably the most impressive part of it. And then you sort of go to that third category, which is barrel control, which is not just making contact, but sort of having the ability to adjust mid-swing or identify where the pitch is coming to and sort of hit that pitch at an optimal angle. So as we talked about earlier, kind of hitting that breaking ball on the outside a certain way. So you maybe you spray it to the opposite field, or, that fastball on the inside, turning on that, catching it out front and hitting it in the air, potentially out of the park or off the wall or to the gap. Those are the kind of things that I think get a little bit underrated when we're talking about hit tools. And we just look at, does this guy make contact? Does this guy strike out? Does he walk at a high rate? The next sort of step, and I think the next step in terms of how we evaluate hit tools, is really going to come down to angles and like VBA and some of those abilities that guys have to adjust and sort of just hit the ball on the barrel at a variety of different locations. And I think when you call out some guys that do this really well, Jose Altuve, and especially like second act Jose Altuve, when he wasn't the slash and dash guy any longer, when he started to hit for some power, I think that's the skill set, at least at the plate, that is very similar to what Kevin McGonigle is. And we're talking about a guy that's been one of the best hitters in baseball for 10 plus years. I think it's that sort of stuff where he's super adjustable. Despite a smaller frame, he's able to get into power, and he has all those prerequisite contact and swing decision skills that really matter. I don't know if there's an area to nitpick, frankly, because when I wrote the article the other day and I kind of dug into the profile, the contact's there, the angles are there, the swing decisions are there. His power is major league plus at this point. He hit a ball 113 the other night and absolutely smoked it. So you can't say that there isn't at least above average, if not plus game power here. He runs pretty well. He plays the game with vigor, and you can tell that he cares about winning on every play, even if it's a backfield game, in March. The first time I saw him, I can remember he rolled over a ball and then just like sprinted down the line and ended up beating the throw from second base, which is like crazy. He's not some burner, but it's just like he does everything full speed all the time. It's always full send. I think my biggest probably nitpick is more defensively. I don't think his hands and actions are great. but he does get the most out of it. I think he's in position to make the play more often than not. But every so often he'll ole kind of a gimme at shortstop. The arm doesn't have the craziest arm strength, but I'm not so sure that matters at shortstop as much as how quick your release is and how good your internal clock is. Dansby Swanson's been one of the better defenders at shortstop in the game with one of the worst power arms from shortstop in the game and makes all the throws and does all those things. So I think he has those attributes. And for me, that gives him a good shot to probably stick at shortstop. I don't think he's ever going to win a Gold Glove there, but can be a really reliable player. And if you move him to third base, you move him to second base long term, I think those are probably really good fits. And he could potentially be a Gold Glover at second base in particular. So an up the middle guy, plays good defense. There's nothing to knock on the bat. I think he's major league quality hitter right now. And I think the numbers are bearing that out in the way that he's destroying the Eastern League, which isn't the easiest hitting league either. This isn't a Texas league. This isn't the PCL. This isn't a place where the ball flies and there's less drag. Like, there are a lot of good pitchers in the Eastern League, a lot of good bullpens, really talented teams. And, they're not parks that are conducive for, the ball flying out outside of maybe Reading.
Project his future as a hitter, because he's 21 years old in Double-A Erie right now. Like you said, he walks, he hits, he limits strikeouts. He seems to already be hitting for power, elite swing decisions, elite bat to ball skills. When he is a big leaguer in his prime, what could the production be? What do the numbers look like? Kevin McGonigle in his prime in the big leagues.
300 batting average, probably about a 400 OBP or thereabouts. And I think he could probably get to a 500 slug. He's probably going to be more like a 200, 190 to like 210 sort of isolated slugging guy, which is good power. I just think like he's not always going to just sell out to hit homers, but he will hit some. So, I think 20 home runs plus is probably very reasonable. I don't know if he gets up to 30, but he might have some peak seasons that are like 25 to like 28, probably double digit steals, and just racks up the counting stats in terms of runs. I think he'll have 100 run seasons, 100 RBIs. That's going to depend on the lineup. It's going to depend on, his lineup position. That's a tough number to put out there because it is a kind of a team number. But I think he's the dynamic type of player that's going to hit at the top of a lineup and score a lot of runs. And I don't think his teammate Max Clark in terms of run production will be all that different.
Also on McGonigle, do you have the preferred player comp for him? Like, you've already mentioned Dustin Pedroia and Jose Altuve. I've heard Alex Bregman mentioned before. Do you think that's a good player comp? And who are some guys that maybe we're watching in today's game right now, or we have watched in the past, that seem to be a lot like Kevin McGonigle?
Yeah, I think of all those, probably Altuve. And I do think it's because of the uniqueness of his barrel control. That Bregman gets every ounce out of his power. McGonigle might hit the ball harder now than Bregman. I'd have to check Bregman's 90th percentile. But based on his career norms, like, he's already hitting the ball harder at 21 years old than Bregman does at peak. And yeah, I think when you sort of look at Altuve, it kind of fits perfectly because Altuve has all those sort of leadership qualities and like all those attributes that we're talking about. He has had 20 plus home run seasons. He had the speed early in his career. I think they're going to look different in their first phase. I think it's more like sort of that second phase peak Altuve that was a guy that would hit for power in the middle of an order. But I think he checks all those boxes and might be a little bit better defensively. But I think probably his best position, if you had a start, Mason Wynn is your shortstop, McGonigle's playing second. He's a really good second baseman. So, I think he kind of fits very nicely into that box. And, I think Altuve is probably a Hall of Famer, right? So I think the upside here with McGonigle, frankly, I said this offline to one of my coworkers, I think the upside with McGonigle is, frankly, this is a Hall of Famer. Like, we don't see a lot of guys that have this sort of upside, and the ones that we've ranked this highly of positional groups have all turned out to be dudes. I think my first group of guys like this was Julio Rodriguez, who has over 19 WAR already at 25, 24, 25. Bobby Witt Jr., I don't even know what his WAR is, probably more than that. One of the best players in baseball, if not the best player in baseball, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani division, best infielder in baseball. And Adley Rutschman, who, even though I think for some people has been disappointing, he's got 15 career WAR and is a really, really good catcher. And I think there's a lot of teams who would still probably pony up a lot if they had an opportunity to get Adley Rutschman on their team. You look at guys like Jackson Churio and Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll. These guys are all superstar level players. Roman Anthony is had a very small period of time that he's been up in the big leagues. We've seen what Roman Anthony has been. He replaced James Wood as our number one prospect last year. James Wood has been one of the best hitters in baseball. Like, so on and so forth. You can go back to Vlad, Acuna, Ohtani. These are all Fernando Tatis Jr. These are all guys that were ranked in the top 3 as prospects. We miss on stuff. I'm not saying that we don't. I don't think we miss very often up top of the list. And that's even prior to me working here in 2021. I mean, there's a long history. There haven't been too many guys we've slapped big grades on, probably since Bubba Starling, that haven't worked out. And since that point in time, we get a lot more advanced information, data, video, everything. It's a different world. It's the information age. So we're able to tighten that up even more so and really have a very good idea of what these guys are like once they come up. So full send on Kevin McGonigle.
Kevin McGonigle to the moon. We need to talk about some other Tigers prospects, beginning with Max Clark. He was the number 3 overall pick in the 2023 draft. He now has more than 1,000 plate appearances in the minor leagues. We've seen him hit. We've seen him run the bases. We've seen him play defense. From what you expected on draft day to what we're seeing today, has Max Clark been below expectations, exceeded expectations, or has he met expectations when it comes to the draft day expectations versus what we're seeing now?
Yeah, I think it's hard because, he's playing alongside Kevin McGonigle, who went later in that draft, of course. I think at the very least, you have to say that he met expectations. I think you can make some case that maybe he's exceeded as well. He's walked more than he's struck out this year. He's hit for double-digit home runs. Power is never going to be his game, at least in terms of like what his swing path is like right now. But he's going to consistently hit for average. He's going to hit those gap shots. He's going to use his legs to make plays. He's been at AA, he's been 50% better than, the average competition when we look at WRC plus. High A was 55% better than the average, peer-based competition in that level in league. He's done nothing but hit. He plays, an outstanding center field. He's valuable there as well. He kind of fits into that dynamic leadoff hitter profile, a guy that, is going to be at the top of that order for a really, really long time. He's going to get on base and have some of the highest on-base percentage in baseball throughout his early years at the Tigers. He's going to be able to hit some leadoff homers. I don't know that, he's going to be Ricky Henderson, but I think there's maybe high teens to like low 20s kind of power upside. Some swing tweaks would have to happen, but all that stuff typically happens once these guys are in the big leagues and they're settled in and they start to make their adjustments. They got the 10,000 hours, their, 1,200 plate appearances or whatever that breaking point is, where they can start to make some of those adjustments. But he's going to come up. He's going to hit for a high average. He's going to get on base. He's going to move runners along. He's going to get on base and wreak havoc and be a problem and put pressure on opposing defenses. And I think he's just going to score a lot of runs. And I think it's going to be really valuable for how this future top of the order sort of takes shape for the Tigers. And I think after years of like lots of good pitching prospects, it's got to be really exciting to have, 2 hitting prospects that look like they could be potentially superstars.
So maybe Max Clark overshadowed a little bit by Kevin McGonigle, but don't forget this guy also is the real deal. For Max Clark, what are you watching with him moving forward? Like I said, we know we can run the bases. We know he can play defense. We know he can hit. Is it that power tool that you're going to kind of watch and wait and see how that develops over time? Or is there something else that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that's probably it. Just consistently, adding strength, hitting the ball a little bit harder. He's not the biggest guy and he's already pretty physical. So I think that's probably it. Maybe improving the angles a little bit more, but you also don't want to take away from, some of the things that make Max Clark. So, it's one of those nitpicks where like, it's not going to stop him from being an all-star, but if we're talking about like an MVP candidate, that might be the kind of thing that he sort of needs to optimize a little bit more. But I don't know. I don't know if it's something that I necessarily want to like go in day one of spring training next year and be like, all right, Max, we're going to fix your angles. I think I want to let Max do what Max does well and be that leadoff guy who's going to score a ton of runs and really set the table for a potentially really exciting future Tigers lineup.
We also have Jose Briseño. He is in AA Erie alongside Max Clark, Kevin McGonigle. What do you think he is going to be as a big leaguer? Because the hit tool is real, the power is legit, but the defense is the big question there.
Yeah, I think you probably don't project him as anything more than a first baseman. I just don't think he's going to be a catcher long term. I don't think they really do either. So I think we're talking about like a first base DH type of guy. So, there's a lot more pressure on the bat to produce, but I mean, I think you look at him, you look at the power that's there. There's easy 30 home run ability here and probably 40 home run upside. And I think a big part of that is the fact that he is such a good hitter. It's a plus hit tool. He doesn't swing and miss that much. He walks. He swings at the right pitches. And I think, all that stuff sort of boosts his credibility as a power hitter. You need to sort of have that prerequisite contact and swing decisions to really be able to get to that consistently once you're facing the best pitchers in the world. So, I think that he has like the prerequisite hit tool in spades. He's got more than enough to get to that power. He's another guy where I think this probably is one of the first things you talk about in spring training is just getting those angles up a little bit more. So more and more of those hard struck line drives turn into, sort of these majestic fly balls, which in batting practice, you'll see. I mean, he put one over the chop house in Futures Game BP, which is absurd. It was almost out of Truist. You didn't see anybody do that. So, I mean, it's like 80 raw power. So I think, just as he starts to get some of those things right about the swing and we start to see it hit that next level. Yeah. I mean, I've seen games in Arizona Fall League. I think I saw him hit 3 home runs in the game. So I think one of them was off of Andrew Painter too.
All right, before we get out of here, let's go back to Kevin McGonigle. You look ahead to 2026, and if Spencer Torkelson is going to play first base, and Colt Keith is going to play third base, and Gleyber Torres is going to go back to free agency as he wants to, and he wants to get that $100 million or more contract out on the open market, Tigers probably won't be giving it to him. So you have an opening at second base. Kevin McGonigle could fill in great there. Or if the Tigers were to go and do something different at second base, then maybe you could do a platoon of Parker Meadows and Javier Baez in center field with Kevin McGonigle sliding in and playing some shortstop. Regardless of how the roster shakes out, what do you think about Kevin McGonigle's chances to make the opening day roster in 2026? And how will the prospect promotion incentive factor into the Tigers' decision-making there?
Yeah, I would think it would factor in at least somewhat heavily, realizing that you can sort of get that additional bonus pool money. They're a team that does really well, I think, over the last few years under this administration in the draft. Things have really changed. They've found a lot more players with upside and are going to want that money to move around. But I also think that this is your best lineup, frankly. So I would put the odds at better than 60%, maybe 70%. There's still the outside chance. I don't know internally, how they sort of view him getting to free agency later and potentially trying to leverage that for an extension early and all those sort of things. But if the Tigers are going to put their best 26-man roster together out of camp, I think Kevin McGonigle is on that team.
All right, Geoff, thank you for all the insight into Tigers' number one prospect, Kevin McGonigle, and thank you for joining the Days of Roar podcast once again.
Thanks a lot, man. Happy to be on.
Everyone, that was Geoff Pontes, prospect writer for Baseball America. Check out his work at Baseball America. He is one of the best evaluators out there. We have more to discuss this week, but first, let's take a break. We're back. Thanks again to Geoff Pontes from Baseball America for joining us to talk about Kevin McGonigle and other Tigers prospects. Chris Brown, let's dig back into it. Do the Tigers have a top-heavy bullpen? And also, second question as part of that, are you surprised that the Tigers optioned Alex Lange instead of cutting Tommy Kahnle when they selected Drew Sommers from AAA Toledo?
It absolutely seems like a top-heavy bullpen. That AJ Hinch seems to really only rely on Will Vest and Kyle Finnegan right now. And I don't blame him. The way it's looked, he still seems to really trust Tyler Holton, but it's been kind of hit and miss so far. And yeah, after that, it's hard to think of guys out there that you can really count on. Like Tommy Kahnle was that way earlier this year. And for the first 3 months of the season, he was great, but he was so awful over the last 6-7 weeks or whatever that people did start calling for him to be cut. I was not surprised that they didn't cut him. I think they believe in who he was earlier in the season. And you saw on Sunday, I think he hit 96 or at least close to it with the fastball, which is not his money pitch. But if you can do that and then fold in the changeup more, I think he can still be successful. And generally speaking, I think Scott Harris and the front office, they don't like to make definitive decisions like that. Like where you don't get Tommy Kahnle back. You can send Alex Lange down, bring him back, send him down, bring him back, all you want. So I think generally speaking, they'll go for a move that doesn't have these lasting consequences. It doesn't seem great for Alex Lange. I feel bad for him, I guess, but he came up and he looked like Alex Lange. And I don't know what more. It was just one outing and maybe he was a little amped up, but this is what we saw from him a lot. He loaded the bases and then wiggled out of it. And he's got some swing and miss stuff, but he doesn't throw enough strikes, and that's going to kill you in this bullpen.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about the way the roster move went down. I don't think the Tigers were ever that excited about getting Alex Lange back from his rehab assignment. Like, remember, the Tigers removed Alex Lange from the closer role early in 2024. Then they optioned him to AAA Toledo in late May 2024 for performance reasons because he couldn't throw strikes. And then Lange suffered the right lat injury in June 2024 that required season-ending surgery. So it's not like Lange was a Tiger when he got hurt. He was a mud hen. And that's why I'm not surprised that he was the one who was sent down. And additionally, why give up on Tommy Kahnle now? Like, what do the Tigers have to lose by keeping this guy around until the end of the season and seeing if he finds it? Again, Tommy Kahnle had a 1.35 ERA in his first 32 games. Since then, it's like a 13 ERA in his last 18 games. But what if he unlocks the performance from the first 32 games at some point in the near future? If he does that, nobody will be complaining about Tommy Kahnle, just like nobody was complaining about him when he had a 1.35 ERA. Also, another thing about Tommy Kahnle that I find fascinating is he's 36 years old. And he has thrown nearly 50 innings. He has thrown more innings in 2025 than he has thrown since 2019. So he hasn't thrown this much in 6 years. Maybe that's why the Tigers just went 9 days in 8 games between pitching him in a game. Like, there was a long extended period of time in which Tommy Kahnle did not pitch. Maybe overusage has played a part in his downfall, and the Tigers are now trying to recover from that. You mentioned him hitting 96 with the fastball. Well, maybe it's because he didn't pitch in 9 days. Right. And I know he's working on his mechanics. He's trying to get the changeup locked back in. That's his money pitch. He throws it like 85% of the time. So he needs the changeup to be good, and he needs that pitch to miss bats. But at the same time, if he's tired, again, as a 36-year-old who has not thrown this much since 2019, if he's tired and he's gassed, he's not going to be able to execute his pitches. So giving him more opportunity to rest now, seeing if he can find something as we get into September and push towards October, I think that might be the best way to go about it with Tommy Kahnle. And again, what do you have to lose by keeping him on the roster? As for Alex Lange, he returned to the Tigers after 14 months of rehab. And then obviously the Tigers optioned him to AAA Toledo after 1 game. We had just talked about that. But I'm curious, what is your confidence level that Alex Lange can suddenly become a big contributor in October? Because you already mentioned it once. He does miss bats. He just doesn't throw strikes. So you can only imagine if this guy does start to throw strikes and he misses bats, that's a really dangerous weapon coming out of the pen in October. But can he get there? What's your confidence level?
It's pretty low. It's, I think Rafael Montero is kind of a similar player. They brought him in and you're like, I don't know what's going on here. But sometimes I mentioned this on our podcast the other day, that sometimes you want your pitching coaches and your team to have the kind of hubris where they think they can fix everybody. They think, we just need to see this guy up person. We could fix him. Luke Jackson, we'll fix him. Maybe not, but
Carlos Hernandez, we'll fix it. Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. So, and maybe sometimes they know it's not going to happen, but they just want to see. And so you like that. But and generally speaking, I feel like they do a pretty good job of getting guys to throw more strikes, even if it's not necessarily, super, high efficiency outings. But with Alex Lange, so much of what he does is dependent on not throwing strikes. Honestly, like that breaking ball needs to drop below the zone to be effective for the most part. And that sinker, we've seen him when he used to throw his fastball, it would just get murdered. So he needs to kind of locate it off the plate and have it run back onto the plate to get strikes. And the changeup, I wish he threw more. He doesn't, but that's also a pitch that needs to kind of dip out of the zone. So if other teams are patient, I just don't know how he can get them out consistently. So I just don't have a whole lot of confidence that he's going to come up and start throwing strikes. He hasn't before. So yeah. And having him come up for 1 game and look like he did last year was, I think, probably not a great sign.
Some injury updates. Parker Meadows, Matt Vierling, Paul Sewald. Center fielder Parker Meadows is coming back from a right quad strain. I thought he would have gone on rehab assignment last week, but it sounds like he can start his rehab assignment as soon as Tuesday, August 26th with AAA Toledo. The Tigers have talked a lot about having one shot to get this right. And by that, the Tigers are saying that they cannot afford a setback in Parker Meadows' rehab, because if there's a setback, he would likely be out for the remainder of the season. So they've been taking it slow, even slower than I initially expected, and very slow and steady with the running portion of his return to play progression. So we're at a point now where I'll be shocked if we don't see Meadows in the lineup for the Mud Hens on Tuesday. But that's the reason why that this has been taking such a long time, is because they feel like they only have one shot to get this right. And if they don't get this right, he could be out for a much longer time, taking him into to September and into October. And that would really mess with things as the playoffs get underway. So they want to get it right. They're taking their time. They're being really careful with Parker Meadows. Outfielder Matt Vierling is coming back from a left oblique strain. He has started hitting. That's a good sign. He is further behind Meadows in the rehab process. So I am not expecting him to start his rehab assignment quite yet. In the same way the Tigers can't afford a setback with Meadows, it's the same case with Matt Vierling. And it's probably even more significant with the oblique injury. Like, they really have to get this right. Especially because, I mean, you look at an oblique injury, go back to early April, Jake Rogers, he suffers an oblique injury. He doesn't return until mid-May. He missed like 6 weeks. Matt Vierling has only been out for like 2 weeks. So it might be 4 more weeks before we see him return to the Tigers. You're looking at late September. So even one tiny little setback, Matt Vierling is going to be done for the season. So they have to be very careful with him. He's further behind Parker Meadows. We'll see when he gets going and gets closer to a rehab assignment, but I am not expecting that to start anytime soon. Right-handed reliever Paul Sewald is coming back from a right shoulder strain. He threw his first bullpen session before Saturday's game. He threw about 20 pitches, all fastballs. The Tigers acquired Sewald from the Cleveland Guardians at the July 31st trade deadline, then immediately put him on the 60-day injured list. That means he is not eligible to return to the Tigers until September 10th. So we won't see Paul Sewald pitching for the Tigers until at least September 10th, but we should see him start a rehab assignment sometime around the first week of September. I think the Tigers want to activate him on September 10th if possible. So he probably needs at least 1 week on a rehab assignment for that to happen. So I think September 2nd could be a good target date for him to start his rehab assignment. Before we get out of here, Matt Vierling question. He turns 29 in mid-September. He has been injured for almost the entire 2025 season, looking to 2026. Does Matt Vierling still have a key role with the Tigers?
I don't know if I'd say key role here, but I think it looks tougher now with kind of the emergence of Winsel Perez as a real good contributor. And what do the Tigers do with Jahmai Jones next year? He's just been kind of, a lefty masher, but he's doing a great job of it. So I don't know if they're going to take Jahmai Jones over Matt Vierling, and then you add in the fact that they may, you look at coming out of spring training next year, you might see Kevin McGonigle or Max Anderson or Hao-Yu Lee win a job. And so the places where Vierling could play kind of diminish. But I do think he still has a role. He reminds me a little bit of Zach McKinstry. There's a guy who can do a lot of different things for you. He plays the game the right way. He's a great clubhouse presence. I think he brings a lot to the team that you can't quantify. And he does play all over the place. And we've seen from Scott Harris that they really just want to stack as many good players as they can. Solid players, somewhere between, fringe average to above average. And I think Matt Vierling fits that, and they'll find a place for him to play. And he's not too expensive, right? Like, I don't know if he's an ARB 2, maybe ARB 3. I don't remember. So ARB 2. Yeah. So it's not, I think he still has a role next year, but it may be a diminished role for him. He may not be a guy who's playing 100 games anymore. He may be playing 60, 70 games and coming in pinch running situations and pinch hitting and things like that. But I think he'd still be a part of this team.
Yeah, if Colt Keith is playing second base, and if Winsel Perez is playing right field, and if Kevin McGonigle is playing third base, where is Matt Vierling playing every day? Well, to your point, he probably won't be playing every day in 2026. All right, it's time to get out of here. Thanks to Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for co-hosting with me again this week. Thanks to everyone out there for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Drop us a rating and comment what you think about the show. Stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, sports editor Bill Bradley, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.